Welcome to the budgetary meeting of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. As most of you know, we've been working on coming up with a final figure for 2022, and we have in the ballpark approximately $503 million that we're going to distribute throughout many agencies in the county. And that's what makes this a very important meeting. Today's Winston-Salem Journal had an excellent editorial about, quote, managing the budget. And of course, we've got Dudley Watts and his staff who do a marvelous job in managing the budget. It's in some areas emotional, some areas it's almost a difficulty that is hard to overcome, but we do that. And today, right off the bat, we're going to start talking about one of the agencies, I wouldn't call it an agency, a system that is very near and dear to all of our hearts, specifically with Don Martin, who's the vice chairman of our board, and he was superintendent of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County school system for years. What we want to do is make sure the schools get as much money as we can give them, and that's what we're all about today. And having said that, I'll turn the meeting over now to our county manager, Dudley Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, commissioners and staff and guests. Really, I think our first objective here is really just to bring you up to speed on kind of where we are. You have in front of you some information. We had, on your behalf, asked the schools to give us some information, send them a series of questions, and so you have those responses to you. I think it showed up on my in my inbox at 8:23, and so Ms. Gillis must have been up all night trying to get all this done. We appreciate your work in getting that to us. So we've got those responses. We also have school board members as well as Ms. Gillis here. Ms. McManus is, as I understand it, we've been communicating by text, and she's in some graduations today, I believe, as are other school board members, and so we certainly understand and appreciate that and appreciate their response to this. Let me ask Kyle if he's got any additional information. You know, as we left it yesterday, we essentially had one spending plan in front of the board for consideration, and with an expectation that other commissioners might have some additions to a spending plan. Perhaps we sort of work with the schools together and make sure we've got good information from them, and we feel good about that, and then we can go on and dive into the spending plans. Kyle, did you have anything else we needed to give them as far as updates go?
I did not, no.
Okay, all right, so it's been pretty straightforward. There were a couple of suggestions, and we had actually received responses. I know Commissioner Elamine had asked about the Urban League, and I think we had actually received some communication back from the Urban League, and there was one other one that Ms. McDaniel had asked about, and we actually received some clarification, but it was really the same project. It was the Feelings Company, which is an agency in the budget book. I don't have hard copies of those, and there wasn't a whole lot.
Yeah, so for the Urban League, it was just an email saying that they were going to submit something, but I have not received anything. And for the Feelings Company, it essentially was just clarification on the playground they want to build at Kimberly Park Elementary School.
Right. So we can, at the break, we can get copies of that, but it was really just more of a clarification on that. So I think that really wraps that up. So I guess I would open it up for questions on the board or any comments from the schools, how we'd want to do that.
Let me make one comment as we get ready to do this. From a personal point of view, I'd like to see us come up with an agreeable budget that we can vote on tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday, and we have a regularly scheduled meeting at 2 p.m. of the county commissioners, and I frankly would like to see us have our act together by tomorrow, and I think we can do that today, but I just thought I'd throw that out because, you know, it's not that we have to do anything by any particular time, but generally speaking, 2 p.m. tomorrow is when we want to do it, I think.
Mr. Chairman, maybe one comment. Perhaps one comment. I did speak with Kyle yesterday, and I think the questions that he submitted to Andre in particular were good, with a lot of pieces. And by the way, I appreciate this answer, but I just got it, and I hadn't quite digested the fine print in blue, which is hard for me to read, but I'll get through it. But it's a lot of stuff. So perhaps, I guess there's two choices. Either one, we stop for 30 minutes and read this, or we have a presentation from the schools, maybe just talk a little bit, and then perhaps we can ask questions about it.
To sort of tee the conversation up, maybe I could ask Kyle if you would come up real quickly. I think the page in the budget book outlines what the request from the schools was, what was in the manager's recommended budget, and then to some extent what is muddying a little of this up, or really several things are. One is the reconciliation that we know we're going to do next in September around the board action that was taken in December, and what that means for the schools, and then also our expectation around Article 46. I mean, we and clearly in the same way that we've dealt with our American Recovery Plan funds and really tried to put that into a plan that impacts this budget. The school's ESSER dollars. So there's just a lot there. But Kyle, can you do a quick run through?
Sure.
And that way we kind of put that on the table and everybody has a good handle on that. And give us the page reference if you
Sure.
would.
So the request and recommendation for the school system is on page 125 and 126 of the preliminary document. It's in the general fund tab of your document. And so as a reminder, the schools requested a total of $153,498,424. And the recommended budget includes $149,457,850, which is a let's see, I don't think I have the difference there, but anyhow, they're get to the other place that you'll see information about the school system is on page 30 in the financial document, in the financial tab. But this is, the difference is really around $4 million. And so, because that's right, because we did a alternate service level write-up basically to basically that was for the variance between what was requested and what was recommended. So that was a total of $4,040,547. And so the other thing the other thing that we talked about last week is around sales taxes and around the Article 46 sales tax. There are two reconciliations that'll be done once the FY21 year closes, and that is to reconcile the amount of Article 46 revenue that has come in. As a reminder, we budgeted $11,050,000 for Article 46 revenue, and through our March collections, meaning we still have 3 more months of collections to come in, we've actually received $13,199,061. We are projecting, essentially that by the end of this year, we'll have an additional $6 million to appropriate to the school system just on Article 46 alone. And then also, as you'll probably remember, when we did our mid-year budget restorations, we added some language that said if our non-Article 46 sales taxes came in more than $2.5 million above what we restored the sales tax budget to, we would provide 40% of the excess sales tax to the school system. And so that would basically amount to an additional $3 million. So really we're looking at an additional $9 million of sales taxes that we believe will be providing to the school system probably around the October timeframe. once the fiscal year closes.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. That's exactly, I think that hopefully clarified our situation.
Yeah, could I'll just sort of, no, you're fine, Kyle, because I'm going to just reiterate part of, I thought through it a little slightly differently. I mean, he just gave those numbers. I took the initial request and in fact, I got most of this information right off of the slide we had last Thursday. And essentially took the 153 million, which is actually 473 above what the formula would have collected. It would have calculated at about 152.5. So the amount that is being recommended is 149, so it's off about 3,070,000. And Kyle's number was the 4 million, which is exactly right off of the request. But off of what the formula would have been, it's about 3 million. And it is only coincidental that the sales tax part reconciliation ends up being about 3 million, which ends up actually, even though it was generated out of the formula from last year, which I also pointed out particularly last Thursday, which is kind of independent of this, it just so happens in this year, it actually kind of offsets that amount. And I think that this is a extremely unusual year. And I think that just as we're grappling with what to do with our federal dollar, so is the school district. And I actually see theirs as it's more complicated because there's really more flexibility. They really have more opportunities to address issues that are more operational than we do. So I think they started that process. They gave us sort of a roadmap without any specifics, but some big things that they're going to tackle, which I think is commendable. So I think by this time next year, we'll know a whole lot more. We'll know kind of where that plan is going. We'll also, I think there perhaps still needs to be, I think probably the formula discussion was good because it kind of revealed a number of things. But I still think that at some point, maybe after some reflection, and it may be after the federal dollars are gone. I mean, this may be a while off. I still think the formula issue needs to be revisited because it is a good way for us to we don't get into their business. They kind of know what to count on, and we are able to sort of operate, and they have total flexibility. So I'm actually probably good with where we are. I think the recommended budget, I think I'm good with that, and kind of have sort of thought through that piece. However, I am concerned about the answers to some of these questions, and I've gotten into part of just reading the answers here in between trying to listen a little bit, and probably I'm not sure there's a good way to proceed. It may be better to have Andre review these a little bit, each of them, but the one that caught my attention that I'll just have some conversation over, which I really appreciated Kyle's digging in the weeds, is really about the charter school allocations. And the charter school amount listed in the budget was $1,119,000 plus. And basically there's, as Kyle looked at the data that he has looked at, that basically that does not seem to jive with the charter school enrollment pieces that we have and we seem to know about. I'm saying that correct, Kyle? This is your question.
Right.
In fact, yeah, it's number
10, I think you're.
five on the list coming down.
Right.
And your comment was justification does not support 1.1 million increase solely funded by county appropriation. And this is the answer that, I mean, as I scanned it, I'm really confused. It says this report was actually to be carved out of the Article 46 sales tax increase. A calculation supporting the increase was provided to county staff. Well, I certainly don't want to, Article 46, as we know, is earmarked for teacher supplements and not for charter school payments, and it doesn't answer the question. I mean, part of the answer to the question is we don't know the exact number. I mean, that's part of the answer to the question. But to be off by 1.1 million is a big number. And that's a lot of kids difference in charter school enrollments. So, I mean, that question, I think we need to get the answer to that today.
And so one thing I will say, and in talking with Andrea, when we increase the appropriation to the school system, even though for next year $17 million or really $6 million of the increase is related to Article 46. That when we increase, I believe what Andrea was saying was, when we increase the allocation to the school system by that amount, it increases the per pupil expenditure, and they have to share that with the charter schools. So even though it is Article 46 funding, so I don't know that it's necessarily being carved out of Article 46 or if it's really attributable to Article 46. But I don't want to answer for Andrea, but I believe that's part of the issue.
I'm pulling out my calculator. I'll give you a second to see if I understand exactly what you're saying, but I also want to get to the order of magnitude that we're talking about. So you're looking, hang on. That would end up being, that $6 million is $111.11 per pupil change. So in order to get 1.1 million more dollars, you're going to have, this is easy, you're basically going to have, I'm not sure I did the arithmetic right, but it looks like it would take 9,900 more kids, 9,000 more charter school kids. Is that right? Hang on.
Maybe it needs a new battery.
Wait a second. Yeah, 111 per child for the 6 million is correct. And so we're 1.1 million off of the amount, which is, and we're going to divide that by 111. So that would be, it'd be, that's under, that can't be. I mean, that didn't come close to, because that's assuming if that were true, then that's a 9,000, that's almost 10,000 more kids. They're not going to be 10,000 more charter school kids. I mean, there may be a few hundred more. See what I'm saying, Kyle? I mean, that adjustment, maybe Andre would like to address this issue here.
That's a good idea.
We're not going to get 10,000 more charter school kids.
Just for the record.
I hope we're not.
Good morning, Commissioners. So
For the
I
record, would
appreciate
you
the Good morning.
would identify yourself?
Okay, my name's Andrea Gillis. I'm the Chief Financial Officer from Winston and Forsyth County Schools. I appreciate the opportunity to answer the questions. So by state statute, whenever our county appropriation increases, we have to give charter schools their pro rata share, a per pupil pro rata share of our funding. So when you increase us by $17 million for the quarter cent sales tax, I have to carve out a portion of that to give to charter schools. So it's not that the charter school.
I'm perfectly aware of that.
Okay.
Ms. Gillis,
So
I'm perfectly aware of that.
So it's not that
the issue becomes is, do you use 17 million or 6 million? You're getting 6 million additional.
Right, but
and you were already getting 11 million.
Right, but when we got the 11 million, I had not adjusted the charter school adjustment for that in my budget. I had not adjusted it in this fiscal year. I didn't adjust the charter school amount this fiscal year for the 11 million. So I'm having to adjust for the 17 million in total, because last year's budget, we only increased it by about $600,000, and that was to get us to what we paid out in 1920.
I just did the arithmetic. It's $314.81 per pupil on a full 17 million. You take the 1,100,000 divided by $384, you're anticipating a 2,864 student increase.
So.
I don't know what your number of charter school students that you're working on is.
So the number of charter school students I'm working on is 3,674. But how the calculation works is I take the total county appropriation. And for this year, I actually took the county appropriation minus the Article 46 funds and did it separately so I could see how much the actual Article 46 funds was actually going to have to be the share for the charter schools. You take the total enrollment of K-12 kids in the district, in public K-12 kids. So I took our enrollment plus the charter school enrollment. I did the average enrollment for this fiscal year and divided that by the county appropriation to get a per pupil amount. And then I multiply that per pupil amount times the number of charter school kids to get the charter school budget.
I'm just thinking out loud, but essentially you had a budget figure for charter schools last year. That number was based on the total amount of money that came from the school district, that came from the county, local dollars the previous year. So you know that amount of money is going to be there. So the only part that's going to change in your charter school payment is going to be the difference in total count of money last year compared to the previous year. And whatever that delta is going to be the amount that's going to determine your extra amount from the budget from 2 years ago. You're taking a number that you're calculating from the entire local appropriation times those numbers, when in fact, you're from a budgeting standpoint, you had something that you spent for charter school reimbursements 2 years ago.
Yes.
So that's only going to increase, because that was already built into your budget.
Right, but that was
That's
based on-
only going to increase by the increase that you have in local dollars, which I think I'm back to the original local dollar increase of 7. I don't know what the amount is from the previous year, but we're back into a way smaller number to pay. It's not the total number, period. I mean, that's your total budget number, but you're assuming in making your budget that you spent nothing for charter school kids 2 years ago.
No, what I did was I said, how much do I need for charter schools for the next fiscal year? I said, our total county appropriation is, I had based it on 131 million, because I include fines and forfeitures as well, of 1.6. So it was 131 million. 130 was the projected current expense fund. That was not including Article 46. 17.6 million for Article 46 to get a total of $149 million. That is what my charter school calculation is based on, 149 million. That 149 million, I did take the total number of K-12 enrolled public school kids in the county, which includes our kids plus the charter school kids. I have our projected enrollment, I use our average enrollment, I use our estimated enrollment, which is based on the average of this year, of 53,220. Charter school enrollment was 3,674 for a grand total of 56,894. I divided the 149 million by the 56,894 to get a per pupil amount. That per pupil amount is what I owe charter schools. I take that per pupil amount and multiply it times the number of charter school kids anticipated, which is 3,674, to get a total of $9.6 million that we need in charter schools. For our charter school budget. We had 7.5 when we adopted our budget. When we got to 2.9, I allocated almost $1 million of that 2.9 to the charter school budget to increase it. So I had to increase it with that money, and then I'm having to increase it again for the additional funds that we've received.
I followed you until you got to 9.9 million,
9.7.
Hang on.
So if you take 149 million, well, actually the total number is 149, 396, 966. And you divide that by 56,894.
But you have to compare. You're looking at increases in the amount of money you budget for charter, the additional amount from the previous budget. So you have just outlined a calculation that actually was what the total charter school payments would be. The change in your budget, you're not starting from scratch. You had a budget for,
Right.
that you paid for, and that difference, I don't think is, I mean, I'd have to, it's your 131 million divided by,
But the
you
131
got,
is
you got
not including-
153 plus 3, you're taking 56,000 kids into your 131 million. That's
149 million.
149 million is what is calculated for 2020. I'm taking about what you calculated back in 2019. So I'm taking the amount that you did 2 years ago.
Okay.
Which is about the 56,000 into the 131 million roughly. Now you're looking at a number that's 149 million, calculating the amount on the 56,000 kids, and you're looking at you certainly should have started with the amount, the 131 million divided by the 56,000 was that's kind of like your number that because you're looking at, we're talking about deltas, we're talking about increases over the previous year. So, do you understand what I'm saying here? We're talking about, it's the increase, and I don't think the increase is 1.1 million. I'd have to just sit down for about 2 minutes and work on it just to
Okay.
convince myself of that, but I just don't think it's 1.1 million. I think it's the delta, which is the difference between the 130, I used the full 17 million and got a.
If you take 17 million and divide it by 56,894, because you can't divide it by the number of charter school kids, you have to divide it by the number of total children in the total children.
I did. I was using 54,000, which is the public school enrollment, and you add in the charter schools, you're at 56. It's kind of taking a long time here for all this here, but
So just on 17 million alone, which is, the charter, I think the Article 46 is 17.5.
I just calculated, I'm assuming your number from the previous year, you had a budget of about 131 million for schools. You divide that by the 56,000, which is local enrollment plus charters, $2,339 per student, times the charter school enrollment of, I just used 3,000, and I'm getting 7 million, should have been your charter school payment the year before.
Yeah, it was about 7.5.
All right, so then if you take this year, you're now, so that was 7.5, so this year you're taking 149, you're dividing that by 56,000, you're multiplying that times 3,000.
It's
So I just
56,894
calculated that for the 149 million. And I got 7.982 million for charter school payments. And the difference between that and your 7.5, you're only $500,000 difference, not 1.1 million.
So if you take 149, 396, 966, which is what our proposed budget request was from the county, including the Article 46, plus the 1.6, that's including 1.6 in fines and forfeitures that we also have to share with charter schools.
I'm just using 149
If
million.
you use 149 million, divide that by 56,894.
That's divided by 56,000.
Okay, but it's almost 57, 56,894 is the total number.
It's not going to make that much
And,
difference.
okay, I get, but my per pupil number is 2625.
I got 2660.
I think you divided it by a different number of kids.
It's close.
Okay, times 3674 is the number of charter school kids.
I used 3,000 for charter school.
3674.
All right, 3674. All right, that is, hang on. Hang on. Yeah, that's going to be 3674 is a lot bigger than the 3,000. Hang on.
2625 and 88 cents.
Well, it looks like your first year's budget, if you take a 3674, right, do this calculation. Just take 131 million, divide by 56,000, and multiply by 3674. That should have been approximately your charter school payment last year. And I get 8.594 million.
Yes, but we had
I don't
7.5
like
because
this.
our enrollment was higher. Our projected enrollment was higher in the previous year. Our enrollment went down. So when our enrollment goes down, their share goes up.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just not comfortable with the way this is going. Could we take a break and allow this to go on in private, please? I'm
that's
not
a great
comfortable
suggestion.
with the way
All right.
it's going.
Let's just take 10 minutes, come back. For those of you just joining us, you are, especially on Channel 13, you're listening to a discussion from the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. We're talking about the budget for 2022, and we have also gotten into a great deal of numbers with two mathematical experts. One is the Chief Financial Officer for the school system, and the other is a commissioner who has a PhD in mathematics. So it's been an interesting morning. Before we start where we left off, I'd like to recognize two members of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School Board and ask if you'd take your time to come to the front and kind of share with us briefly what you have on your mind. One of them is chairman of the Finance Committee of the school board, and that would be Mrs. Kaplan. If you can, you and
Marilyn.
It's four people like that.
I'm sorry.
It's four.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have four members. All four of you come up. We can have a meeting. Because you come right down to it, folks. These are the folks that are going to spend the money. And you do deserve an opportunity to say a few words. And I didn't see all of you back there, but it's good to have you with us. And just for television's sake, if you'd identify yourself with your name so they'll know that you're here. And
Okay, thank you. I'm Leah Crowley, and do I need to give my address also?
No,
usually
you
have to
don't
do
have
that? Okay. Good morning, Chairman Plyer, County Commissioners, and Mr. Watts. Thank you for your dedicated service to our county. Your commitment to education during my 2.5 years on the school board has been exemplary. Raising our teacher supplemental pay, funding our facility needs, and paying for positions not covered by the state are just a few ways you support our public schools. Without this support, our children would suffer, and in turn, our community would suffer as well. I'm confident you will give our funding request your utmost consideration. We have much work ahead to achieve the goals set forth in our strategic plan in the areas of student achievement, equity and access, and climate and safety. Your decision to fully invest in the education of our children is a difference maker. We know that obtaining a high-quality education is a key factor in our children's ability to rise out of poverty. The schooling they receive right here in Forsyth County will determine their trajectory in life, whether it be to continue their education or become employed. It is an awesome responsibility and honor you have in providing them a path pointed upward. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to advocate for our schools. I greatly appreciate your support.
we're glad you're here.
Thank you. I want to echo everything Leah said, and thanks to all of you. I'm Marilyn Parker. I'm a member of the school board, and I come today as the old gray-haired lady who has a lot of history. So, and that's really what I'm going to address today. First off, I'd like to say to Dr. Martin, condolences. I read where Coverdale Kitchen is closing, and I know that was near and dear to your heart. So, sorry. I do want to give a little history lesson for a minute. I go back to the days before the funding formula, and I always called it the beg, borrow, and steal show, where we had to line the pews up with lots of folks to convince the commissioners that what we needed and why we needed it. The funding formula came, and I thought it was a gift from God. It was a wonderful way for our schools to have funding, and we've worked through that. Through the years, and it has been a better process. I think it has made relationships between the commissioners and the board members better, and I think we've had a great working relationship through that process, and I thank you for that. Through the years, for the past maybe 4 years or so, we've talked about relooking at the formula and readjusting, and I think that probably is a necessary item to be looked at. I know with my second tenure on the board that I was on a committee where we looked at the funding formula, and we started to revisit it, and then I think that kind of got pushed away with some other things. But I'm here today to say that, and maybe to the point that it maybe does need to be after our ESSER funds and your funds go away or whatever, but we do seriously need to relook at the funding formula because it is a good way for us to be funded. And, I was really disappointed and hurt, I guess. A little bit of me was hurt when I read in the paper that wouldn't be what we would be using this year. I just want to make sure that that's on the radar screen. And if we can, between the folks, maybe Mr. Watts and the folks of the school system, maybe set up a timetable as to how and when we want to do this. I, as a board member, would greatly appreciate it, and I think maybe you guys would as well. So if we can work toward that, I think that would be beneficial for all concerned. So thank you once again for what you do for us and in the support, and I look forward to continuing the good relationships that we have with you guys.
Thank you, Marilyn Parker. And we only have two who are going to speak. The other two don't want to speak. No words of wisdom? Okay. Well, we'll go from four fine school board members, to our very fine county manager, Dudley Watts.
Okay. So I think that's really, do we have other questions? We do have staff from schools to kind of work through. I think it was helpful to lay out sort of the almost the environment that we're budgeting in, and kind of where the recommendation came from. Okay.
So what's your pleasure? We were right in the middle of a discussion regarding the numbers, Don.
Yes,
and
I can, thank you. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, I think I can recoup it and recount that. And I do want to thank Commissioner Wisenhunt for suggesting that we take a little offline recess. Thank you for stepping in and being the adult there. Thank you. That was good. It helped. And I want to, this is an issue of some interest. We had to go through 2, 3, let me just say, methodology-wise, based on the $153 million request, basically the 1.1 million additional that would be required, if that were the budget figure, that would be required to come off the top out of our quarter-cent sales tax money to retire it for charter schools, because basically the statute does require every current expense dollar that comes into the district, and there's no way you can not call that current expense money that comes into the district. You have to give you the share per charter. You take the per pupil share of the total local allocation, and you give that share to every charter school for their number, each individual number of kids. The confusion on my part, and I will put it on my confusion piece, was that we're in the same fiscal year. You all recall we went through $11 million allocation this time last year for quarter-cent sales tax in anticipation. We realized it was going to be different mid-year, and in fact that it's going to be substantially different. And that 17 million alone will actually end up accounting for most of that. It's not going to be 1.1 million, because we're going to back off to the 149. If we approve the $149 million allocation, that will back off another 4 or 5. The number will be about 900,000 instead of 890, 910, somewhere in there. That number, which will be there. So I want to thank Kyle. We kind of reconciled the capital outlay piece as a part of that. There are two different 149 millions. There's 149 million that are in the budget recommendation total. There's 149 million if you take off from the 153 to the 149, if you take off the part that's not subject to charter school pieces. So coincidentally, there were some of the same numbers meaning different things. So thanks for the little powwow to get that straight. And I do want to make it clear that Andre's calculation on the 153 million was correct. I mean, that was correct. I got in a couple different directions in that, so I'll be more clear in that. So, but basically it is, I think we got that resolved, and that's a piece of it. Which kind of brings me back to the very issue with all the answers to these questions. And and obviously my scan of that answer was not a good way to approach this. And it might be helpful if it would please the commissioners to have Andrea come forward and just kind of march through these pretty quickly. And that way, won't be any jump into things, and we can interrupt you and ask you questions about those as we go.
Okay.
If that's satisfactory.
Yes, that works.
That's a good idea, and I would like to mention, Commissioners, once she finishes with her presentation, which I think is, Don Martin is right, it's very good for us to find out what exactly is on this piece of paper we have. But the other part of this equation is I'd like to give each one of the commissioners an opportunity this morning, and you can start again, as you did yesterday, Commissioner Wisnant, explaining your view of what you think we probably ought to do. And then from that, we'll have some input from each commissioner. We can move forward and see if we can't come up with some kind of decision sooner than later. Do you have any problem with that? Okay, you go right ahead. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. So the first page of the responses is just the district response to the ASL recommendation. So the first line of salaries and benefits, we requested $662,000, and the recommendation is pretty much cutting that in half, and they said annual turnover, county manager notes, our annual turnover should result in increase being less than half of the state average increase. Well, I mean, we do have vacancies every year, but we have a fantastic HR department that's going to be trying to fill those vacancies. So we don't anticipate having a lot of vacancies when we open up school in the fall. And so the 3% represents the anticipated step in salary increase for locally funded teachers. That's the step increase they get every year. And we anticipate that it'll be at least 3%. The governor's budget actually wanted to make it 10% over a 2-year biennium, so I just used 3 because, the governor's budget doesn't always come to fruition, so I was trying to be a little bit more, conservative and use 3% for the 1 year. And so I do think that those funds will be necessary to give our locally funded teachers their step increase, as well as any other increase that the state may give them. This is for certified teachers. The next line is a state mandated increase for 3%. This is for classified and non-certified staff. I requested $106,000, and he said based on the slightly lower percentage increase. Well, the fact that the governor put in 7.5% over a 2-year biennium, I thought 3% was a conservative number, so I used 3%. And also, there's a strong push at the state level to raise LEA minimum wage to $15 an hour. They've already done that for state-paid employees that are not LEA employees, and there's a push for that. I'm thinking that 3% is probably a good number to use for a classified salary increase, considering they haven't had it in a long time, and that revenues are looking good. So I'm thinking that there's going to be some kind of classified increase, specifically since there's been this push for the $15 an hour. I don't know if that's going to happen because it's very costly. However, I do think that they will provide some sort of classified increase.
So, if I may interrupt for just a second, you're making claims about a governor's budget. That's the proposed budget that the governor sent to the legislature, which hardly ever goes anywhere. But is your budget based on that?
No, it's not based on that. It's just based on the fact that when he puts it in there, sometimes some things he puts in the budget do go through. So I'm hoping that the legislature will try to do something for raises, considering the year we've had and what happened to education during the pandemic.
If we adopt this budget and that doesn't happen, where does this money go? To a reserve?
It will go to the compensation adjustment for our classified staff, because we want to do that as well, so we can get our classified staff up. This total request, well, I received a preliminary projection for the funding formula, and I tied my request to that number. So everything that I requested was built in using the formula number.
Okay.
So whatever we get, it will be adjusted in that compensation for adjustments for staff. That's the line that will get adjusted. But if it comes in higher, then I'll have to find the money to come in higher. Like I'm anticipating where the retirement rate's going to be. I really don't know. I just use a 3-year average. Same thing for health insurance. I use a 3-year average. But if those numbers come in higher, I'll have to find money to pay for those as well. But I just requested a 3-year average amount. I mean, it's unfortunate that we don't get this information until after you provide us a budget. But once you provide us a budget, I have to work within that budget that you give us to make everything happen. That's the state mandates us for us to do as far as salary and benefit increases. Right. But I wanted to make sure that my request tied to the funding formula. And I know that it's $970,000 above it. That's because I think the funding formula changed a little bit from the time that I was given the estimate. So, but I was trying to make sure that I lived within the formula with all my requests.
I was just wondering what you're basing your budget on, and if it's based on what you assume is going to happen with the government.
Right. Well, no, I did not. I was just using that as an example of what's already been out there, because there's no other information out there. I pretty much talked to all of my colleagues around the state, and they're pretty much using 3% increase as well. That's like a standard, or like an average that's being used by a lot of school districts around the state for increases. Because 3% typically is what the state will do as far as an increase when they do give us one. The next one is compensation adjustments for staff. This $2 million was just, I'm not going to say it's a plug, but it was just the amount that was remaining after I did everything that I had to do, within the confines of the formula. $2 million was left, and I was going to use that to adjust compensation for school-based and central office clerical staff, as well as skilled trade and maintenance staff. As the county manager pointed out, it's hard to fill jobs these days because of what happened with the pandemic, and we're having a hard time filling a lot of our jobs, especially in maintenance. So we've already addressed custodial with the $2.9 million that you gave us in the fall. We've addressed custodial, we've addressed bus drivers, we've addressed cafeteria workers, we've addressed teacher assistants. Now we wanted to try to address other classified employees because, we want to do something for them as well.
These are all classified employees.
Yes, all classified employees. The next line is the new.
Quick question, please, before you go forward. Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
The first three items are your largest ticket items that I look at. The $9 million that's been proposed you might receive in October, would that allow you enough?
Well, that will be one-time funds. And I can't do a salary increase with that because it's not ongoing. So the $9 million we'll get in the fall, I'll have to talk to my board about what to do with that, but that will be one-time funds. Because, I could do a bonus, I could do a one-time payout, but I can't pay an annual increase with one-time funds because I won't get it the following year. So I can't do raises with that.
Okay. Let me say this in historical context. I entered the school system in 1958 and graduated in 1970. So I have a lot of faith and confidence in the school system. But the essence of our relationship is based on mutual respect for each other. And I love the school system. But let's maintain a mutual conversation here. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You may continue.
Okay. The next line is Lewisville Middle and the Virtual Academy. The majority of this request is to open a new Lewisville Middle School, and there's going to be ongoing custodial costs for that because we are adding additional square footage as well as utilities costs for that school. It's not really prudent for us to use, I could use fund balance, but it would deplete my fund balance after a while because I need ongoing funds to cover the cost of a new facility. So that's why I requested the $677,000. The next line is the charter school of the 1.1. I think we've already answered that question. Are there any other questions on the charter school number?
Except it will be a less number.
Right, but yes.
Depending on what you will adjust.
The number
depending
that
on
I have
whatever
here
it
for
is,
the charter
small
school is
number.
based on my estimate
Yes.
of
I
the county allocation based on the funding formula at the time.
It's just a comment in reference to charter schools. Unfortunately, the General Assembly does not let the dollars come back to us when those kids come back. They go to charter school, they get dissatisfied, they come back to the public schools, and we're at a loss, basically. My hope is that our wise ones in the General Assembly will realize the expense of those charter schools to the public school. That hasn't happened yet.
Right.
But that's my hope and prayer, that one day they'll be wise enough to follow and see what really happens to a lot of those kids. I used to teach at a charter school and was a principal of one. And I know a lot of times those kids would show up for maybe 6 months, 2 months, and go back to the public schools. That's a problem.
Yeah. Well, I do look at the calculation, more than once a year, and I use an average enrollment. So if their enrollment starts to go down, I use the average of what the enrollment was for the charter schools to make my payments. And I do at the end of the year. At the beginning of the year, I have to do an estimate. Then at the end of the year, I do a setup of how much what their actual enrollment was. So sometime, and this wasn't done in Winston-Salem prior to me arriving, but I will be doing a settle up. So if at the end of the year, their enrollment went down, they would owe us money. And that money would come back to us. But I will do a settle up. But then for the most part, I will owe them money because if you give us additional funds, I have to give them their share. So like next year, if we get this one-time money, I have to give them a share of that as well.
Okay.
The next question is about technology, $370,000, and it says fund with ESSER. This was not actually included in the county increase. The increase in the technology department was due to a transfer of software costs from the accountability department to the technology department. So it wasn't really a part of the county increase or the request of the county. So this would actually be a cut to my base budget if this is not, if this cut is, comes to fruition, because it's not really a request. It was just money that got transferred from one department to another. All right, the next section is talking about the ESSER funds and how we plan to use them. We have been having community engagement sessions with members of the community on the ESSER funds to get together feedback. Once the plan is approved, we are actually planning to present to the board on the 22nd, and once the plan is approved, we'd be happy to share the full plan with the board. But we have a preliminary plan that is out on our website that I've listed the link there, and I can read off some of the actual things that are in our plan. I can get my computer to come up. And just for clarity, the ESSER funds that we receive from DPI have to be requested in an application. That application has to be accompanied by a detailed budget, by budget code. And they have to approve or deny the request. And they can approve or deny it based on one line item not being allowable. And so we were given the guidance that our ESSER funds had to be used in response to COVID, and that we were not to, move expenses from local over to ESSER just to save money. So they're saying that we need to only in response to COVID. So, for instance, custodial cleaning is in response to COVID, but it would be the additional cleaning that we're going to be doing in response to COVID, not the cleaning that we normally do, that we put on ESSER. So some of the things we're going to be doing with the funds are educational technology. We're going to buy student Chromebooks and cases, charging carts and lockers for schools so kids, don't have to worry about the power, their laptops powering down. We're going to be providing hotspots to those in need. We're going to have resources to maintain inventory and clean and repair devices. We're going to have software and improve access to technical support among students and instructional personnel through programs, platforms such as Zoom and Canvas. And we're going to have appropriate assistive technology and adaptive equipment for EC students. Those are some of the technology things we're going to do with the ESSER funds. As far as sanitizing, cleaning, and repairing and improving facilities, we're going to have additional cleaning supplies for high-touch areas such as desks and tables. We're going to replace the water fountain and coolers with touchless bottle filling water fountains and coolers, so the kids don't have to worry about putting their mouths near the water fountains. We're going to evaluate and repair HVAC systems for maximum efficiency. And these are all proposed, this was in our proposed plan that we've shared with the community. And like I said, we're getting community feedback now, and we're going to adjust our budget based on that community feedback, present it to our board on the 22nd, and hopefully they'll approve it on the 29th, and then we will share it with you whenever it's approved.
But can you talk a little bit more, particularly about the last, because what you've just gone over basically those are not big dollars.
Well, the HVAC is about 20 million.
Excuse me?
The HVAC was about 20 million, I think.
Well, it depends what you're doing. I mean, it kind of depends, and that it would be nice to have and I think I realize it's premature, and I think the desire on this question was to begin to get bigger sort of stroke dollar signs, and that it would have been helpful. And I mean, obviously you can spend $20 million on HVAC pretty easily. You can spend $100 million, but it depends. I mean, what is practical that you're really going to try to do? You already did a bunch of air quality issues, both of which the county helped pay for, and you all use some of your funds for.
Yes.
So, but a lot of those, even using your $20 million figure, I did some back of the envelope calculations on technology. What you identified in your presentation is probably in the into 25, you could maybe stretch it to 30, 25 to 30, but you're really looking at about, you're in probably the low 50s so far, and you've got another 150 million left. I mean, and I'm real curious more particularly about the last bullet is addressing the learning loss and sort of the strategies that you think to do that. And I know you've been talking about it for a while, but I'd be curious where your ideas on that are, because I'm just trying to come up with where these dollars can go in the next 3 years. I mean, that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. And I was going to get to the learning loss. I was going to go through the list of all of the different things if you're interested in hearing the other ones. So we're going to improve the preparedness and response efforts. We're going to continue our school COVID coordinators, which we had someone at the school who was a COVID coordinator at school who would be responsible for making sure that if there's a COVID case, that all the contact tracing is done and everyone's notified. Also, we had the contact tracers at the district level who also going to be doing additional contact tracing work. We want to hire additional school nurses to support all students with health needs. And we want to continue our district cares team, which are our community-based people that will go around to the communities and try to get the kids who have learning loss and who have not been engaged to try to get them back engaged. Also, we're planning and implementing activities during in case there's another long-term closure, if there's another spike in COVID. We want to hire instruction support staff with devices. We want to give our, TAs devices to make sure that they have devices in case there's a closure and everybody needs to go home. We want to make sure our video conferencing platforms for teaching and learning and expanding the Virtual Academy's high school program. So we are trying to expand Virtual Academy at the high school level. Right now, we have a K-8 Virtual Academy. We want to expand it to the 9 through 12 for any kids who still do not feel safe to come back to school. We want to have software to support legal documentation, so we want to do a lot of paper documentation. We also want to maintain cloud-based security programs to protect against hacking and malware, because we are using so much technology now. We want to make sure that technology is protected. We want to provide mental health services and supports. We want to have additional wellness for staffing for our students, mental health coaches, social and emotional learning coaches, and social workers, because a lot of our students are really traumatized by what happened with the pandemic and not being able to go to school and see their friends and not participate in sports. So we want to make sure those kids have supports. We want to have professional development for the youth mental health aides, school crisis prevention training, and trauma and resiliency framework. So we want to make sure our staff is trained to deal with the trauma. We're going to have activities related to summer school learning and after school. We have a very extensive summer school this year. We have about, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 students that signed up for summer school. Oh, I'm sorry, 7,000 students signed up for summer school this year. It was huge. We're still trying to make sure we get enough teachers to cover that for this year, but we do have the state-mandated summer school that we're trying to do. When we anticipate doing that for the next three or 4 years with our CARES funds, because those funds don't expire till September of 2024. We can do 4 years of summer school, so we will be paying for 4 years of a larger scale summer school than we normally do, to try to address some of the learning loss. And other things we're going to do to address learning loss is to provide supplemental standardized curriculum. We want to make sure we get the right curriculum materials for our students. We want to engage our teachers in curriculum writing to make sure that they support these standards-aligned resources. We want to have data-driven professional development. We want to make sure we have substitutes in case there is outages. We had a 60% fill rate this year when it came to subs and teacher absences. So we want to have a company come in and help us with our subs. That's their job. They source subs for a living. And so we wanted to hire that company using our ESSA funds to do that, to make sure we get a 99% fill rate for our subs, close to 99% fill rate. And then we want to have high school graduation coaches. We know that high school graduation is very important. We want to hire graduation coaches for all of our high schools to make sure those kids, specifically at-risk kids, and ensure graduation. So those are some of the things we want to do that are in our plan. We did have a detailed plan that equaled to $215 million. Like I said, once we finalize that and our board approves it, we would be happy to share that with you with dollar amounts, because we did submit a preliminary plan to DPI in order to get our plan approved, because if you did not get it approved before in May, then you had to wait till the fall to get your funds. So we did submit a preliminary plan just to get the funds approved, but that plan did equate to the $215 million.
Wait, would you mind sharing that with us?
We submitted a preliminary plan to DPI in order to get the funds approved. You know, with federal grants, you can submit a plan, and then you can do an amendment to that plan if your plans change. So we submitted the plan just to get the funding, our preliminary plan that staff came up with, and now we're getting community feedback so that we can adjust our plan based on the community feedback and any other feedback that we get to amend the plan, and then that's the plan we're going to get approved by the board.
I won't belabor this anymore. Last question is when do you sort of, because we're working on a timeline for ours, trying to figure out something. And what is kind of your timeline for sort of locking some of this down?
Well, our plan is to lock it down by the end of the month. We want, like I said, we're going to present to our board at the end of the month, and they will hopefully approve it before the end of the month. And then once it's approved, we will share that plan with you, and we'll try to implement our plan. But, because we have this money for 3 years, we will be looking at our plans and making sure that what we're doing is working. And if there's anything we need to tweak, we can also tweak that and do an amendment to our grant with DPI. We can do amendments throughout the grant and change if necessary.
Last thing, and when you do that, this is something I commented when you made your original budget presentation. It'd really be helpful if you all would sort of just indicate what you see as recurring and non-recurring in that, because you will be funding some recurring things, and I'm just curious. I'll be real curious to see that, and it'd be nice if you all indicated that.
Yeah, we will definitely make that a part of our presentation to our board. What is ongoing?
That's good. And so you're going to finish by the end of this month?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, when you're done, we really would be interested in seeing that.
Yes, we definitely will share that with you once it's approved.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
this might not be the best place to ask this question, but I really need to be able to respond to some folks who have called me. There was such an outcry over the article in the paper about the Chromebooks and the damage and the loss. Do you all have a plan how to replace those? And it's going to be very expensive, isn't it?
Well, right now, we're going to use our ESSER funds to make sure we have enough Chromebooks for all our students. That's part of our ESSER plan, is to replace any of the Chromebooks that we need with ESSER funds.
I understand that, but what do you do about all these that they never show up, or they're damaged to the point they have to be thrown away?
We're going to come up with some fees that parents will have to, like if they're lost, we have to have, somebody has to be responsible for that. So we are looking at creating a fee schedule. Yes, last night. I think we approved it last night. Yes. So there is going to be a damage fee schedule, but we also, are going to make sure we have enough funds, using our ESSER funds, to make sure we can do any kind of repairs necessary. Because we know, when you give a third grader, a device, or a fourth grader device, sometimes things happen, things break, and we understand that. So we're building in funds to make sure we can repair have repair parts on hand to repair the devices ourselves. But we also are going to have to make sure that there's some kind of technology cost if those devices get lost.
Would any of the school board members like to comment further on Mrs. Wisenhunt's comments? Yeah, come right on up. Come on so we can all hear you, please. There you go.
Can't believe I'm talking on technology, but anyway, we have a plan so that, like in third grade, we will all third graders will receive a new Chromebook, which will take them through until sixth grade, when they will get another. So we have a replacement plan every year using the ESSER dollars, as well as one thing that we didn't do this year that we have in the plan is that we have bought these covers for all of the Chromebooks, which make them a little more non-destructible. It's a really hardcore cover so that the normal wear and tear will be less, hopefully, on those. But we do have a replacement plan for all Chromebooks so that, children, they will be updated at like every 3 years. So.
Other comments from anyone in the back? Thank you, Marilyn. I'm sorry.
Marilyn did a great job.
Okay. She did a good job. Go right ahead.
One question, Mr. Chairman. if
Oh,
I may.
yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Very quick question. I worked in a school system before that had conflict resolutions in the elementary schools. In fact, the whole program was called conflict mediation, and it cut down on the violence in the schools, et cetera. I'm raising the issue because we've had such an outbreak of unfortunate violence among young people in our community, and I would hope that maybe a recommendation could be that we might establish something like that in the elementary schools to counter that situation, or to at least address it somewhat. That may be a long-term solution to some of these problems we're encountering. Just a suggestion.
If you could, I don't think you got to speak, identify yourself, so we can all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Bohannon, and I am a recent appointee to the Board of Education. So
Yes, sir.
it's very good to meet you all. I did want to speak to Commissioner Elamin's question. So the district currently is engaged with a variety of different forms of restorative justice practices. We are looking at our code of conduct very intensely. We are taking a very systemic approach to changing the way that we do discipline, but also the way that our children are interacting with each other. We are partnering currently with Triad Restorative Justice to really work on those conflict mediation pieces. We are also engaged with the School Justice Partnership as well. So we're working on those things, and that's a part of the work that we're doing moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could I take 30 more seconds?
Yes, sir, take 31, go right ahead.
The end result of my experience with that is that students themselves became the court for themselves. And you'd be surprised how they can actually determine what's best to be done with their peers. And they had to sign a contract. And if they violated it, there was a consequence beyond just a student peer. But it really was a good exercise in self-management. And I'm familiar with the Triad Restorative Justice Program from its very inception. So I congratulate you on having that.
Okay, we'll definitely take your ideas back to our executive team to look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I think you can continue.
Well, that was just the response. Now, I do have some questions that were asked by Kyle, if you want me to go through those answers real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. And so, well, that was the first one, about the ESSER funds. Okay, the status of schools under probation, which is the definition that was used, or the threat of being taken over by the state. What are we going to do to get those schools off probation or be categorized as low performing? So the data that's being presented now is 18-19 data, performance data, because we didn't have testing last year due to COVID. We currently have 21 schools designated low performing by NCDPI. That means they have a performance grade of D or F. And Mrs. McManus wanted to make sure that she personally answered this question because she's very passionate about this subject, and she also wanted to apologize for not being here. Like Mr. Watts said, she's at a graduation, but she said these are her words. She said we're going to ensure strong leadership in every school. We have replaced principals in chronically underperforming schools and are coaching and developing the others to lead improvement efforts. Ensuring a strong daily focus on instruction. Schools that are underperforming must have urgency around the implementation of guaranteed and viable curriculum. We have provided on-grade level rigorous materials to teachers and have ongoing professional development. Teachers will receive science of reading training this summer, followed by on-site instruction, coaching in literacy and mathematics through the 21-22 school year. In addition, the use of data to design instruction, make decisions, and monitor progress will be standard across all schools. All schools will follow the best practices from our instructional framework, and we will use the continuous improvement model to assess, teach, and support student growth.
Let me interrupt you here for just a minute. The purpose of this question was to find out, have we improved or not over the years since the DPI has been grading our schools? How many schools were on probation at the time and are not now? Or have we increased the number?
I would have to get back to you on that question because that's not my level of expertise, but I will definitely get that question answered and send it to you later on today.
Okay. So what I'm concerned about, and I think I share this with our board, is that we're looking at outcomes. You are our single largest item in our budget. And we have been hoping that the outcomes from the schools over these many years would be fantastic. There have been lots of things that have gotten in the way. I'm not blaming this on the current superintendent nor the school board, because it's been a long-going issue. And sometimes the state doesn't do the best job of grading. But I am concerned that we have schools that are failing. And there's no need for that with the kind of money that's been available. So there must be something else beside the money. And I hope that the board will pay attention to that in the very near future and try to get these schools back on track. Thank you.
Okay, all right, I'll definitely.
Perhaps I can just add one thing to Commissioner Kaplan's comments. And it would be interesting, when the rules change regularly, things are problematic. And basically, the definition of low performing has changed a lot in the last 15 years. So when I cautioned you all for asking this question and for the answer, I kind of expected probably the long answer, which would have been, here's a history of what's happened in basically accountability in North Carolina, including changing the test, changing the way the tests are used, changing the cutoff scores, the use of growth or not growth, what is the definition of low performing, how has that changed? So it's not as simple as there's been one goal or one metric or one measure, and then it's been the same and you can compare how we were 15 years ago or 10 years ago. It's very, very different. However, be that as it may, as long as it's current, then looking at progress is exactly what we should expect. And I think growth is the absolute most important thing to measure, and that is a part of each school accountability, and looking at that is absolutely a key thing. And to answer your question about the single biggest issue causing low performing is poverty. And if there are high concentrations of poverty, you can track attendance across this state, not just in this district. You can track that.
It's been with us a long time.
Andrea, for me, going along with the other commissioners, is that I'm looking for the end result, like the school report card. So if we can get that information back, that would be helpful to me. Or if Tricia can tell us, is this something that you're looking to not really resolve, but work through the school year of 2022? Mm-hmm. So that's
Okay.
That's the. Yeah, I need to
We
figure
have a
out when
couple of
that's-
members of the school board back in the back, if you'd like to come
I
forward.
bet. So we have a total of 72 schools. How many schools? 80?
Right.
And so 25% of them are failing or nearly failing.
So, first, it's good to see you all. I am Elizabeth Motzinger. I have been on the school board now for 14 years. I need to say that as somebody who cares deeply about public education, I never use the term failing schools. And I'll tell you why I don't use the term failing schools. These are schools that are working really hard with kids who are coming in with a level of trauma that I hope nobody sitting at this dais ever experiences directly. We have kids who are coming in who don't know what a fruit is when they start in kindergarten, because I have worked one-on-one with our children. And so when somebody uses the term failing schools, what they do is they basically disrespect our educators who go walk into something that is harder than any one of us can imagine on a daily basis. What we do have is children who are living in a society that doesn't provide them adequate housing, adequate medical care, adequate all of the things people need. And it's one of the reasons why we keep asking for things like a $15 minimum wage so that working parents can actually be home with their children at night. Please, we can talk about school performance, and we can talk about, and we do. I have never, ever attended a school board meeting or worked with an educator who was not deeply and passionately concerned about school performance. And so if you want to talk about how do we work together to make it better, that's a really good conversation and one we all welcome. We do not have failing schools. We have a society and situations where we have children who need a whole lot more than we know how to provide. And I promise you, every single person who works in education is doing more than you can imagine to try to address that problem. So, thank you.
Elizabeth, you kind of started a spark here. Go right ahead.
So I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the context, because I know that when we look at performance, I know a lot of times I can't speak to what has happened prior, but I do want to address just some of the sort of operational and logistical needs within the district that have happened that have, to me, sort of shown me as a board member that we're in the right place now. So when our last superintendent arrived, and I believe that was 2019, Dr. Harrison arrived to the district, almost half of our senior team positions were vacant. So she had to hire a good team. And after that happened, we've immediately, and Andrea is a really good example of that, immediately we have seen improvements, and we know that this team is capable to get the job done. After Dr. Harrison left, Tricia has come in, zealously and is fiercely committed to the district's goals and our focus on equity. And so one of the things that I know that has happened just within the past year is that some principals that were in those schools who are underperforming have been moved. We have changed leadership in those schools. We also have shifted around our priorities, and we are continually committed to an improvement process so that we're constantly willing to be agile and to move. And then to the question, our high school graduation rate has increased. There has been movement in our individual schools. And of course, I'm sure Andrea, as she said, will get you that specific data, but that I can confirm for you.
Marilyn Parker is moving.
I'm moving again, sorry. Thank you. And just a couple of points. And Dr. Martin was exactly right with the moving target. Two things, and I always tell parents this when they're going, oh, well, I don't want to go to this school because it's a horrible school. Have you seen what's happening there? Look at growth. You can have a school that has a 92% proficiency rating, but if they're not growing every year, they're not doing their job. They are underperforming. So that is the important thing, I think, for us as a school board, for you as commissioners to look at, is the growth of every school. Because you can have a school that is rated low performing, and I volunteer in one and have for the past 15 years, but that school grows every year at a phenomenal rate. So that's the important thing for you to look at, is look at the growth rate of every school. And that's what we need to be looking at, and you as well. So
I'm confused. What does a growth rate mean?
It means how much a school has grown. So you start with a score from your testing, and then in the end of the school year, you look at how much that school has progressed, what their growth was, how many points they have gone up. It's a percentage. There's an EVOS score, and that's a whole nother, that'll take you a year of classes to figure out how to do EVOS scores. But we have schools that have a really low proficiency rate that have, if you ever see an EVOS thing, they'll either be green, yellow, or red. And that means they're either have a high growth rate, they're maintaining, or they're declining. So that's the important thing to look at.
Okay, thank you. So for me, one of the reasons I'm glad we're not doing the formula this year is because we get to learn stuff. But secondly, since I've been in the legislature since 1970-something, we've always talked about we're throwing all this money at the public schools and we're having not the outcomes we look for. So testing was started, and it continues today. I don't know what the test consists of today, but this county is putting a little over $150 million into a local system where we're actually not even required to do, well, we say, Gordon, maybe 20% of that. And we would like to see schools perform. And it's up to y'all. We're not running the schools, you are. And we just are knocking on your door again to say, come on, this is getting out of hand. You've got a new superintendent, you've got a fairly new board. I hope that you can make a difference in these test scores and these outcomes. And relieve the pressure on our social services after they graduate.
And I think it would be helpful for us to, and that's a good point, because schools that are underperforming that you would look at as underperforming and the state would consider to be underperforming, I think it would be interesting for you to see how much growth those schools are making. They're still a D or an F school, which means that their proficiency level is low, but their growth level is high, higher than some schools that have a high proficiency rate that would be rated an A or a B school. So and kind of to Elizabeth's point, we've got educators that walk in those buildings every day, and they are making phenomenal gains with children who have not the same resources and not the same pre-K experiences or all of those things that are necessary for a good educational background. And so I think those people need to be appreciated, and I think we need to look at that. Then growth is the only level playing field that you have between every school in the whole system to look at, because you can have a high proficiency level and be in the red and have no growth. And so if I've got a child who is the next Einstein, but the school that child goes to has not made that child grow a whole year's growth, that's a disservice to a really brilliant child as well. So you know, that's the level playing field that you need to look at for every child's education. So.
Well said.
It's just a point. And if that's what you guys would love, I mean, we as a system I think we would embrace that, because I think it would help you understand exactly what is happening in schools as far as education goes. So if that's something you guys would like, we would be more than happy to provide that for you.
I'm sure glad you're here. Wesley Young from the Journal was writing just as hard as he could while you were talking, so I can't wait to see what you end up with. Okay, back to the numbers.
All right. So I think I was almost done answering the question Ms. McManus had answered it. We want to ensure we have top talent in our lowest performing schools, and we work closely with HR to ensure that our 21 schools are staffed with effective and highly effective staff. We also have addressed vacancies to ensure we are fully staffed by day one of the school year. We want to provide equitable funding. We will provide funds to each school to support Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions using proven tutorial models and academies, and funds will be distributed based on the number of students less than proficient in reading and mathematics. We'll also provide additional funds to schools for families and community involvement, involvement, field trips, and extracurricular activities so students can gain experiences that will increase and enhance the vocabulary and families become more connected and empowered. These are the main areas of focus, although there are other programs, other important ingredients to turning around underperforming schools, which include creating a culture of high expectations. She said, for more information, please feel free to reach out to her. The next question was about the topic of locally funded positions. I have provided a chart in the back on the very last page that answers that question. So I will go through that chart once I get to that page. How much does Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools charge out-of-county kids to attend Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools? We charge $1,975 per year, and that's been in effect for the longest. I mean, I just got that information from.
So you lose money on each one?
Based on what is being charged for the last 10-plus years.
Who sets that rate? The state?
I think
School
we
board
do.
policy.
I think the school board policy sets that
Board
rate. So
policy sets
we'll
it.
need to look at that and address it. You know, I'm just. Is this a semester? It's twice a year? Okay. I was told it was a year. Okay, so it's semester then. I'm sorry, semester.
So when we talked earlier, I asked you how much it was for each child. You said 2,600 and something.
Yeah, that's the calculated per pupil amount for the charter schools, yeah. But I think that this number has not been looked at for a long time. But this is what we charge people for tuition. It's not the charter school number. The charter school number is like a
This is what
straight.
you charge somebody from Yadkin County that wants to come to Forsyth County.
Yes.
And you're charging them 1,700 when it costs you 26.
Well, $1,975 per semester, so it's double that.
Okay.
I thought it was per
I'm
year. I
sorry.
was told it was per
It's a
year,
semester.
but okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What is that? Is that equal to what your cost is?
That would be about
better.
3,950.
So you're collecting more than your cost.
Well, that's our local cost. That cost I
Right,
told you
I
was the local
understand that,
cost, yes. So we're collecting more than our local cost, yes.
Come up here, Elizabeth Motzinger. Would you please come up to the speaker so we can hear you?
My understanding is that we have tried to charge out of county students basically what we're paying from, what we're getting from you for our students.
Correct.
Right? Out-of-state students, and there have been some requests for that, we charge basically what we get from both the state and locally. So it is indexed basically to, and whether it's been updated, we can certainly review it if that's a request to make sure that it's exactly a percentage of what we get from
Why
county
wouldn't you do that every
commissioners.
year, at the start of the year, when you do a budget?
You know, I will tell you honestly that as a school board member, what I try not to do is to get into every single detail of every single piece. I also would like to just say that I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am to have Andrea with us and to have her having walked into our district with an awful lot of things that she had to address, hitting the ground running. Now with the second superintendent, she has done an extraordinary job, and I cannot tell you how proud I am sitting back here listening to the presentation she's giving. I need to be really clear about that. I think she's doing a phenomenal job for our district and for our children. So yes, we can revisit that number. I think the big picture that she's trying to present to you today is a big picture, and she's been doing quite an extraordinary job in my estimation.
Thank you.
Yes, we will look at that. This, like she said before, I've been trying to deal with a lot of different issues, but this is one I will look at because it has not been addressed in years. Our tuition revenue is not that much. It's minimal, so it's one of those things that was low on the totem pole for me to look at, but I will be looking at that. The next question is an estimate on budget savings for 2021. So what will the fund balance be? So our fund balance at the end of 2020 was $6.9 million. We anticipate that we'll have another $2 million additional to add to that at the end of 21-22. At the end of 2021.
Do you have a goal on your reserve? How much a percentage of your budget?
Not really. We at one point in time, we had about, 18 million in the fund balance at one point in time. Right now, it's at 6.9 because we have been spending some of that down. And if you remember the audit from 2019, we used $5 million of our fund balance because of over expenditure. So I will, we do want to get it up. Obviously, there's no hard and fast rule for school districts. Our child nutrition program, they suggest you have 3 months of reserves for child nutrition. And we do have that for our child nutrition program, but 3 months of reserves, 3 months of expenses for us would be, hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's not reasonable for us to have that kind of fund balance, but we do want to have a fund balance just in case there are things that come up. So will the $2 million requested for compensation adjustments go to all positions other than bus drivers and hourly food service staff? Or for clarity, are these payments adjustments, these are payment adjustments that continue on, not one-time bonuses, correct? So yes, the $2 million that was requested was to adjust compensation for school-based and clerical staff, like I mentioned before, as well as the skilled trades and other classified employees and maintenance. This request was for a permanent salary adjustment and not a one-time bonus. So we wanted to try to get our salaries up a little bit for that level of classified staff. Can you clarify what a traditional assistant principal would do at a non-traditional virtual academy? Should the principal-based pay be funded by the state? And it is. Principal-based pay is funded by the state. However, we pay our principals more than what the state pays. So we have a local component for principals. So whenever, we get this new school at Lewisville, the state will pick up the state-based pay, but we'll have to, chip in some for the local pay on the local side. But at the virtual academy, an assistant principal will perform the similar functions to an assistant principal at a traditional school. These functions include staff attendance, student attendance, reviewing lesson plans, student testing, grade level administrator, and other duties as assigned by the principal. So our virtual principals do similar work to our principals in a traditional school. And like I said, the principal base pay is funded by the state, but local funds are being requested to fund the local principal pay and local assistant principal pay at the virtual academy. And funds are also being requested to fund the local principal pay and a local assistant principal pay and a few other positions at the new Lewisville Middle School, because, when you open up a school, there are positions you have to have at every school. Principals and assistant principals are one of them. A lot of the other teacher positions will come from those schools that will be feeding into the new Lewisville Middle. So we didn't ask for any additional teacher positions. We did add I think a 0.5 psychologist for that school, because we want to have a psychologist at every, a part-time psychologist at every location. And a part-time social worker, which is not really a part-time person, but it's just that person will be split between schools. So we'll have to add an additional allotment for that. But the teachers are going to be following the students from those schools that will lose students to the new Lewisville Middle School. But some positions just have to be funded, like a principal and an AP.
Can I ask a little follow-up on that? So it's partly dependent on how you interpret the way the language is, but I'm assuming there is a state principal unit paying for your virtual academy principal.
Yes, the principals,
And it's
yeah,
only the
exactly. It's only
difference
the
in the
local
state
pay, yes.
However, for the assistant principals, I suspect a lot of your assistant principals are totally paid out of local funds.
Yes, yes.
A lot. In fact, I was probably a little surprised, not seeing that there are 131 locally paid administrators. Now the administrators are actually 1/3 of the locally paid teachers. I mean,
That administrator number also includes central office administrators as well.
I know.
Okay.
So, I'm just surprised that it's that high. So the issue on the assistant principal pay in that local that's probably totally local funds in the assistant principal for the virtual academy. You're not generating a lot more kids in that, and you're kind of adding more schools, which without more kids and there are not enough state. If I'm assuming they still fund assistant principal months,
They
basically,
do.
and you're taking months, and that number's not growing very much without enrollment growth, and you've in this budget adding 2 more assistant principals.
Yes.
So they're probably totally locally paid assistant principals in that case.
I actually found funds use some other state funds to pay the state salary. This is the local portion that would be on local.
Okay, I didn't know there were too many state funds you could shift over into assistant principal
Well,
months.
we currently pay some APs out of our at-risk funds that are at our at-risk schools.
Okay, all right, I got you. That's good, I got that. Okay, thank you.
All right, is there a new position being added to the attorney's office, and is it funded with local dollars? There is a new position in the attorney's office. However, it was funded from a chief of staff position that was eliminated from the superintendent's office. So it's not new local dollars. It's just a transfer from one department to another. When Dr. Hairston arrived, she did some reorging within the district and reorged some positions. And then since Mrs. McManus has taken over, she's also made some changes as far as reorging. So there are going to be a lot of changes in the department pages where positions move from one department to another, or if a position is eliminated, that position is used to fund another position. So we didn't ask for any new positions as far as local dollars, except for the ones for Lewisville Middle School. Those are the only new ones that we asked for.
But it is funded with local money.
It's funded with local dollars, yes. However, I would like to say that with the state, with our state, local, and federal budget, we try our best to be efficient with our resources, and because the state pays the highest paid person, if it's a principal, assistant principal, a teacher, any other certified person, they pay the highest paid person. And so once we get our state allotment, because they give us allotments in people. Once they give us our allotment, I pay the highest paid person with state funds, and then use local funds to backfill that. So any given year, that number can change of how many people we pay on state and local, because of the fact that I can pay the highest paid people on state. We try to pay the highest paid people on state, as well as try to put as many positions as we can on state, because the state picks up the benefits. Like if the person's out for short-term disability, the state picks that up. Workers' comp, they pick that up. If they get longevity, they pick that up. So our goal is to try to put as many positions as we can on using state dollars.
I'm with you. Do we still fund a little over 400 positions in the local system? The county?
Look at your last
Right
page.
now,
Look at your last page.
we have 842 in the proposed budget.
But that's a bunch of clerical, no, that last page, clerical and technical staff, 387, and then you'll see 324 teachers and 131 administrators. That's what I was talking about, on the percentage of local administrators compared to teachers.
Yeah, there was an effort made by the former superintendent to have the dramatic pay increases for those in the central office. Is that in your budget this year?
No, it is not in our budget.
Thank you.
We're not saying that we won't, we don't, she doesn't, there are not any talks about doing that, but right now it's not budgeted.
This is a very helpful, the chart at the bottom of that page, the
Yes,
last page,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
very helpful. I mean, the big numbers don't matter particularly, but that's very helpful with the, to see that on an annual basis, that's helpful. Thanks.
You may continue.
Okay.
842. Wow.
So question number 9 is the same question for accountability and equity. There are additional positions that are going to be added to the accountability department, but they're funded out of a federal grant, so they're not funded with local dollars. Page 74, we're talking about the charter schools. I think we've already answered that question, so
got
I
that
think we're
one.
good to go on that one. Marketing communication is something being contracted out that was once handled by staff. Salaries are decreasing and salaries and benefits are decreasing while purchase services and supplies are increasing. So like we said before, with the change in leadership, there have been organizational changes in the central office departments. Some departments gained positions, some lost positions, some were moved to other departments. All organizational changes were reviewed and approved by the Board of Education. A few positions in this department were vacant and were eliminated and used to fund positions in other departments. And the increase in purchase services is due to the print shop department being moved to that communications department. So it was a shift from another department which caused that increase in that supplies and materials department. In operations, there's a significant increase in salaries and benefits as well as supplies and materials. Can you clarify? So some, like I said, with the reorganization that we had, a lot of the operations positions were moved over to maintenance because that's kind of where they really belonged, but they were in the operations budget in previous years. And that's why the maintenance budget increased, which answers question number 13. Maintenance budget increase. And also the maintenance budget is increasing due to the request for Lewisville Middle School for the custodians and for the utilities because that's where that budget is housed within the maintenance budget. And that is funded with local dollars. And then, like I said, the last page is the requested information on our budget, broken out for the last couple of fiscal years, with salaries, benefits, purchase service, supplies, materials, equipment, and capital outlay, and other. And then also the breakout of the locally funded positions. I won't go through all the numbers. I'll let you guys study that, but I won't go through all those numbers.
How do you handle part-time people in this thing?
I just count them as FTEs.
Like half-time teachers, for example. Do you account for those?
I'll count for them as a FTE, full-time equivalent. So if I have two
Convert
half-time
everything to
teachers,
full-time
yeah,
equivalents.
exactly. If I have two half-time teachers, I count them as one teacher.
How hard would it be to go back on this, because that bottom chart, the value of the top part does show the change in benefits, which has been, when you look at it real dollars,
Right.
benefits have been going up, skyrocketing, and taking a huge percentage. But of the actual, that position total, how hard is it for you to go back and recapture a chart just like that, say from this 10-year period, 2011 to 2021? Could you do that? Is that a hard thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, it might be because I don't know. I can look in, I guess, prior budget books to see if it was in there, if it was in prior budget books. Yes.
The hard thing, I think, is doing
yeah.
that full-time equivalent piece.
Yeah, because
you could get the, yeah.
We budget at the full-time equivalent. These are budgeted positions, so we budget at the full-time equivalents, but there are times when specifically a principal has the autonomy to hire a half-time teacher and another half-time teacher. So, we budget based on full-time equivalents. We don't really budget based on part-time.
Yep,
Unless it's a part-time budgeted position. So like a cafeteria worker could be a part-time position. But as far as teachers go, we budget at the FTE level.
You got way too much stuff to do between in the next few months, but that, from the long term, that would be a great thing for
Okay.
us to get an idea, because, and this is only a recollection side, but we used to be around 400 local teachers.
Right.
And
400 local
I'm a little
teachers, you
surprised
said?
that's dropped to 324.
Yeah, because like I said, when the budget comes through, when the state raises, like when the state raised the salaries for teachers, we try to put as many as we can on state. We shift our funding around because we want to put the highest paid people on state because they pay for them. So if they add teachers to our budget, then I shift those teachers to state. If they cut something, a certain category, I'll move that, I have to pick up that on the local side, but I'll be able to shift something else to state. So that's what we've been, that's traditionally what we've been doing, is paying the highest paid people and trying to put as many people as we can and putting stuff on local. Like if we have contracts, put that on local and put people on the state funds.
Yeah, if you were able, if you were able to produce, at a time when you had some time, produce a longer period of time, you would actually see that state growth in positions where that has happened and allowed that to take place.
Yes.
And it would show that distribution of percentage, of changes, which would be, I think from a local, from our perspective, local funding piece, that's very helpful to get an idea about how all that's going.
Yes. And so right now you see this position, this is the proposed budget, like the 2021-22.
Yeah.
When we adopt, the numbers will be still different again because once I get my state allotments, I'll be moving,
You'll have everything
shifting things around again, looking at the average salary of teachers. If I have some, higher paid teachers that retire this year, they'll come off, and then I'll put other teachers that are lower paid onto state because I want to, like I said, keep the highest paid on state.
Excuse me, I'm assuming your 2021 numbers are exact. I mean, yeah, well, actually, maybe not.
Well,
because it'll not close out till June. Well, you probably know.
Well, this is the proposed budget. That's what's in the proposed budget.
I'm not talking about 21, 22.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm talking about 2021. Are those your final numbers in
No,
positions?
those are just budget as well.
Oh, well, I'd be real interested to see how from the previous years turned out in actual, not
Okay.
budgeted.
Okay.
If you could adjust those, and I think that it'd be very easy for 2021 to see the exact things, because, changes do occur during the year. So it'd be nice to see how you close the year out in positions in 2021. Yeah, and see, my interest in the past is actual funding, not budgeted. I'm interested in what actually got spent.
Yes. Well, this year's going to be an anomaly because we had the CARES money and we had the CRF funds from the state. So we did some shifting around. For instance, we wanted to fund some stuff out of CARES, but due to the federal uniform, like our technology we bought this year, we were going to use our CARES funds for that. But because we couldn't wait for a bid process, we wanted to use state contract. We shifted the cost to local and moved teachers to the ESSER funds, to the CARES funds.
Yeah,
So it was like a swap. So that number may be lower this year, but only because of the anomaly of the COVID funds.
Well,
that
and
we had this
actually
year.
having a federal column on this, if we're really looking at valuable data,
Right.
if you had state funds, federal funds, local funds in positions, that would track your Title I positions, it would
Right.
track, and then it would track your CARES Act items that you've had, which would show the anomaly during the COVID years.
Yes.
Which, that would be really valuable
Okay,
data.
I will try to get that together.
Yeah, yeah, you got a lot to do right now, but that'd be great. That'd be great to look at.
Yes.
That'd be great to look at.
Well, I
when
can't
you
promise
got
I can
some
get it to
time
you before tomorrow, though.
So let me ask you some in the weeds questions.
Okay.
This has been bugging me. I watch you guys meet now more than I ever did because Deanna's there and I keep watching you on Channel 2. So the food service contract, is there still a provision in that food service contract that requires the vendor to provide funds for the superintendent?
Yes, it's like 135,000, I think they provide there's still that fund.
And that
Good
is
negotiating buddy when that thing was created. What are you talking about?
what? It's always seemed like a sleight of hand to me, and it just doesn't make sense to me the way it's done. It almost looks like a payback, but I think somebody needs to take a look at that.
Okay.
And figure out a more reasonable way of doing whatever you're doing, but to have a contract, depending on how much money, or in there is how much money they put to the superintendent's office for whatever purpose it may be, seems it'd be like us saying, Dudley, have a contract with XXX, and by the way, put a little something in there for you. It just doesn't make sense.
It's not for her, it's for the district.
Yeah, I'll let Marilyn answer that instead of me.
Here comes
Here
Marilyn
we go
Parker.
again.
Marilyn was there when this was created.
This is your third trip to the podium.
I think I'm remembering correctly. You can help me out if I'm not. But so when we put that out, RFPs and whatnot for a food services contract, we really were very adamant that we keep all of our cafeteria workers being our own employees. So because we didn't want them, to become the vendors' employees. We wanted to keep them as our employees. And so that was a part of that negotiation in that contract so that we could keep all of our cafeteria workers, all our food services people being Winston-Salem, Forsyth County employees. And so that was a part of that negotiation, if I remember correctly. Am I right about that?
That's correct. And we ask in the initial RFP, we ask for any other, if you will, it's kind of like what we would pay you to get your business. It's kind of, I mean, it wasn't in the superintendent's line item, it wasn't that part. There was an amount of money in the original bid of 3 very large vendors and very competitive vendors bid. There was actually kind of some was one-time money and some was continuing in order to kind of to get your business. It was for the district.
Yeah.
It was for the district.
And
it was not for anybody.
Let me just say, it looks like you're trying to avoid some public scrutiny over how much money goes to
I
the
agree.
superintendent's
And
office.
maybe it needs to be.
That's an inappropriate
It needs to be
name.
done a
Yeah,
different
it
way,
needs to.
in my opinion.
Well, it just probably needs a new name, because the other thing that, the first year, we were in a big technology push, and so they funded a lot of technology for schools in those years, and then after that, whatever surpluses we had, then we as a board, in conjunction with them, were able to use that, but that money came back to the district, never went to the superintendent's office. And I agree, I didn't realize it was even called that, so thank you, I learned something today too.
Well, there were future, and when those contracts were 5-year renewable contract, at the end of 5 years, it was rebid. So, I mean, I think the district's in cycle 4 of 5 years.
so.
And in a latter iteration of that, they basically, the amount of money to get our business got a lot less.
Right.
And they basically had a small amount of money and said, we'll provide, this kind of money, as a set aside. And I think the board actually discussed the issue of making it because I used to bring it in once a year. This is sort of here's the reconciliation of the Chartwell's. We used to just call it the Chartwell's dollars.
Yeah, we
called
always call it
that.
Chartwell's. So
But
that's what I knew it as. I didn't know it was called superintendent's money.
It was a Chartwell. It was a
Call
Chartwell.
it anything you want to call it, it just
Yeah.
ought to have more public scrutiny.
Well, no,
got-
and that's what
it got
is.
scrutiny.
It
Oh,
does,
okay.
and we as a board have always looked at that money and been able to say, okay, this is where we want it. Actually, one year, we actually put it into bonuses for our food services people and
Yeah.
things like that. So,
A
I mean,
bunch,
it's been
first year.
used for, the first few years, it was actually earmarked for technology, because that was a big push, but.
Okay, one other question. Back to you, Andrew. Consultants. You're hiring a lot of staff people, and apparently you're hiring a lot of consultants. Do consultant contracts have to go through your office, or can they be done separately and not a part of that?
No, all contracts come through the legal department and my department.
So if a superintendent wants to know what consultants you've had, there's a list available in one location.
Yes, well, contracts, because all contracts are not for consultants. We would have to go through those contracts, because we do contracts for multiple, a multitude of things. So every contract is not necessarily with a consultant, but like, for instance, our contract with our custodial vendor, I wouldn't consider them a consultant. They're providing a custodial service. Are you talking about all services, or are you just talking about specific consultants that do
If you
consulting
hire,
work?
if your school board decides they want to hire a consultant for some educational purpose.
Yes.
Diversity is one I've heard about, and I've heard about some educational program, I think 2 or 3 of them that have come up. Some teachers like, I hear some teachers don't. Are those contracts, do they go through legal or do they go through you?
Both.
They go through both?
All contracts go from legal into finance for my,
So there are no consultant contracts that you would not see?
no. Unless they're paid, I don't see the ones for capital. Those go
What does that mean?
for the bond funds.
Building projects.
Yeah, I don't see those contracts.
And they're paid for out of what?
The bond funds.
Are you responsible for the bond money as well?
Technically, yes, but those contracts go through legal. Because, those contracts go through legal. They don't come to my office.
Okay, so then there are contracts for consultants that you do not see.
If it's
But
for,
do you pay for them, or they come out of some other fund? Like the superintendent's fund, or whatever you call it, charters fund?
they come out of the bond funds.
Okay.
But don't you have to sign those? Don't you put when it's just like any kind of the paying process, isn't that a normal finance office function, even for the capital projects?
But the capital project funds, when I
even for the bond
arrived
funds.
here, that process had been changed, I guess, so I'm working on getting that changed back so it comes to finance office, but this is the process that was in place when I arrived. So I will be looking at those contracts going forward.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Fair enough. Thank you. That's all I got.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Have 30 seconds again, please.
Yes, sir, go right ahead.
First a comment, then a question. When it comes to assessing progress in a school in terms of growth, it's been about 10 years since I retired, and I was somewhat of a little rebel. But I thought a portfolio on a student said more about the person's growth than a number on a test. But a portfolio requires a lot of time and investment because you can individually determine growth in that child's learning capabilities. And at that point, we had something called 5 different intelligences. So you try to measure that child's ability to learn from listening, movement, etc., and see which one best fit his learning style or her learning style. Again, a lot of investment. But this idea of using numbers to assess a school is absolutely insane. I'll give you one example. I've taught kids from AG to multiple descriptions, which I call alphabet students. Some of those alphabet students had to be read their test to because the state required that, even though they couldn't read. I'm going to say that again. Some of those kids, because of their disabilities, had to have their tests read to them. Now just think about that for a minute. And that number was a part of a score for the whole school on one level or another. So the numbers alone are not enough to evaluate a student's progress. On a personal level, school improvement portfolios that we used to do quite regularly measures the student success much better than anything else. What has that school improvement done in the last 3 years? Is it growing, et cetera? And those teachers make that determination. All right, that's enough on that because I don't want to get too far in the weeds here. The second thing, when I first started working here, I was in a CDC program at South Park. I left there and went to Glenn High School. When I got to Glenn the first year, they just become a high school. I had a grandmother call me who lived on Union Cross Road and said, Mr. Ellamain, my grandson is in your class. He'll be the first one to graduate in my family. And this boy tried to drop out many times, but he ended up going to the Career Center to do mechanical stuff because he was good with his hands. And when he graduated, he came back to me and said, Mr. Ellamain, I got a good job. I got my high school degree, and I got a certificate as a certified technician, mechanic, making $28,000, which is a lot back then for a kid coming to high school. That, to me, says more about this school system than anything else. It's what you do to inspire the child to be successful. And I know what they do down in Raleigh. They count beans to assess impact. But to me, that's an insult to education. Education is more qualitative than it is quantitative because you're talking about the human development. And I'll end that. We'll continue to discuss among ourselves, eventually make a decision. And I support your budget request.
Thank you.
But just one comment. When I saw the list of questions that Kyle sent over to you, I said, boy, that's a load. And so you did, in a short period of time, did a good job summarizing all this stuff. Obviously, the accountability thing could have been a day worth of stuff, but we got into it, and I appreciate Marilyn jumping in there and giving that little growth sort of explanation piece, which was great. But I promised the commissioners that there was a lot of information being requested, and you guys covered it. I covered it very well, and I want to compliment you on that.
Thank you so much.
Can I take 10 more seconds? I forgot one question.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for the detailed budget you submitted here, especially the way you answered all these questions. I didn't see a discussion about dropout rates, which is a concern of mine, especially among black students. So if you could just sometime email that information to me and what we're doing to address that issue.
Request.
Okay, thank you very much.
On the low-performing schools.
All right. Thank you.
Mrs. Wisdom?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you also. You've certainly been in the hot seat today, and your information has been very impressive. But I just have to say, I am fascinated by how fast you can talk.
My brain moves very fast. I have a little ADD, so
You're certainly
Some of us
not.
older folks don't listen quite as fast.
I'll try to slow down next time, I promise.
That's okay.
Well, you started on page 1, and by the time I got to page 1, you're on page 3.
Thank you. I really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to address you and to plead our case for our budget.
Thank
Oh, gosh, yeah. Commissioners, let me ask you a question. Would you like to take about an 8-minute break?
Yes.
And
How about an
we'll
hour?
come back, and each one of us can give their ideas on what we need to do here in conclusion to what we're hearing. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Motzinger, you made a great amen corner.
I wore warmer pants today.
How you doing?
Good afternoon for those who are, well, it's just about afternoon. It's 11:30 in the morning now, and we are, Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, in the Commissioners' meeting room, working on the budget for next year. Could be close to $503 million. We've had a very good meeting this morning. When we recessed for a little while, the idea was to give everyone a chance to rest for a moment and then come back, and each commissioner can give his or her ideas regarding what they think the budget should be and how it should look. And then at that point, we'll break for lunch if you'd like to do that. And then, Dudley, you may want to comment on this, but following that, unless we have additional things we need to discuss, Commissioner Kaplan has suggested we try to get everything ready so the staff can get the final presentation ready for tomorrow, when we will vote on it at 2 o'clock. And that's with the reminder that we have a meeting at 10 o'clock tomorrow, either virtual or here, depending on what you want to do. But the meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock will be in person.
Yeah, we do not have a board meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
If necessary, you could continue the meeting from today, and we could go into session at 9 or whatever time you need to, but.
Or we could settle it this afternoon so you could get to work on it.
That's right, that's right.
All right, any further comments before we get into the meat of what we're doing? Let's start with Commissioner Gloria Wisenhunt, and each commissioner can talk, and we'll just come up the road. What you want, what you expect, what are the problems, needs, and interests of Forsyth County as you see them, and how you'd like to see the final document in what form when we vote on it tomorrow at 2.
Well, yesterday at the end of the meeting, wait a minute. Yesterday at the end of the meeting, I presented the Winston-Hunt-Linville plan, and that's still the plan that we wish to present, the two of us, and that is to adopt the manager's recommended budget and his recommended continuation budget. And then with the over $6 million that's left, do a further decrease in the tax rate of 1.6 cents. As I said yesterday, this community has been great to the school system, to us. I mean, they have passed bonds. I don't think a bond has ever failed. In fact, it passes overwhelmingly for schools, for courthouses, for libraries, which are the things that we are supposed to provide as county commissioners. And I think that we should show some gratitude to the citizens for their loyalty to us and give them a relief in the tax rate. You know, it still would not be revenue neutral, which I really believe we should do, but the money's not there to do that. But to reduce the tax rate another 1.6 cents is what our plan is, and I think that the budget that staff has recommended is a great budget. It is over a 10% increase from last year, and I feel very comfortable with this plan.
Commissioner Elamine.
I may have to take more than 30 seconds on this one.
That's
Mr.
perfectly
Chairman.
all right. Take your time.
You know, in principle, my colleague, Commissioner Whisenhunt, has a very simple presentation. I'd like to present an Elamine plan, though. And here's why. This influx of federal dollars we got called the American Rescue, plan, by purpose and design, is to benefit those people who had the greatest difficulty during the COVID, and basically incurred a lot of the negative results of being in a situation that they couldn't really avoid themselves. So that money was designed to get them out of that situation or to rescue them from the devastation of COVID-19. And all of us experienced that. So I was really looking for a principle, a policy we could follow to really allocate those funds. And so I have a few things I want to just suggest based on facts and purpose. One fact is that we already have included a reduction in taxes for our citizens in Forsyth County. I think. Am I mistaken or am I correct?
You're correct.
Thank you so much. What I like about Ms. Winston is she's absolutely honest with me at all times. Even though we don't agree, she tells me the facts just to say, oh, and I appreciate that. Now, so I concur, we need to always be considerate of tax liabilities. We pay taxes because it's a privilege we have to live in a democracy. We just don't want to pay too much. And I'm in that same boat. So we should have a reduction in property taxes. I concur with that. But I don't think we should use that $6.8 million additional dollars for that purpose. Now, beyond that, the federal government is dragging its feet as always about how to use these rescue funds. They have still not sent us a final interpretation of how to use those funds. We have tentative guidelines. And I've been working with a group called it's an ad hoc community group by the name of County Equity Roundtable. Just a group of people trying to do the right thing behind these funds. And we came to a conclusion that at least 80% of these funds should go into what's called qualified census tracts, because those citizens suffer the most behind COVID-19. So I'm going to suggest that we look at this very closely, see if we can use close to 80% of those funds for that purpose. We've already used about 24% to cover some losses the county incurred. So we're going to miss the 80% mark. So I'll compromise to 70%. So I'm going to suggest we use 7% of those federal dollars to help those specific tracts that have suffered the most behind this COVID-19. Now, what does that translate into? How much money have we received so far? What's the first check for how much?
It was half of 74 million.
Okay,
So
all right.
30.
Well, I did a little arithmetic earlier there, and I
Around
think
37 million.
37, okay. All right. So we use about 24 million of those for the next 3 years to cover some losses. So that's a dent of about 24.7% into the total amount of $74.5 million. So I really want to make sure that we as a board are using those funds for the purpose they were designed for. And I'm going to propose we use that equation, formula, to make sure those funds are allocated in those specific qualified census tracts. And we have the maps of the areas of Forsyth County that would qualify for that. And then there are a list of things that I looked at on our alternative, appropriations. I think we're going to have a more detailed discussion about that. But my suggestion is that we, of course, accept the continuation budget presented by our, distinguished manager. I think the staff's done a lot of work on that. But I don't want to spend any more than, let's say 75% of those dollars from the federal government on anything but qualified census tracts at this point.
This is not bad.
Okay?
Could
all I
I
have
just
to say
say
right
one
now.
thing? This $6 million is not part of that federal money. It's two different things.
Okay.
Am I not correct?
Well, it came from it. However, it replaced money that a formula calculated that we lost. And we know that we followed the way the formula allowed us to calculate it. And as a result, it shows about 18 million of the 74 that basically are that we can actually use any way we want to. So that 18 million came from it, but it can be used any way that we want to.
Right.
And what the county manager suggested is that it be looked at 6 million a year.
Right. Yeah, I was aware that it was not a part of the big 74.5 million. So I think we can also use those funds to give those citizens programs that have proved themselves to have a good track record that are serving communities' needs. And we have a lot of agencies that do that on the behalf of the citizens. So I would lean more toward using those funds for that purpose at this point. I may have further comments later on. I've used up my 30 seconds.
Okay. You can take any amount of time you want. Commissioner Ted Kaplan, you have nothing to say. Okay. Commissioner Don Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually sort of started with where Dudley ended up with sort of his recommended budget on the slides. I kind of went back to that slide. And I do want to make a general comment that I agree that the manager's recommended budget is, there's a lot of good work, a lot of good people in this room worked on it, and I think it is, I think it was very, very thoughtful. I think it rewards staff at a level about 5%, which I think is very good after the pandemic year and a very tough year, which I think is good. Improve some reevaluation, I mean, some reclassifications, as well as restore some other both salary options and others, which is very good. And it actually ended up, by doing that, as he went through, he ended up with about $8.3 million that were available for reappropriation or tax reduction. And his recommendations that he made on alternative service level requests, we looked at yesterday, $2.5 million, basically sort of takes that, which I think were good suggestions too, that piece, and that takes us down to about, it's about 2.6, takes us down to about 5.7 million that remains. And I took a look at that. I sort of took the list of projects that were kind of got the greens and yellows, and I essentially, there are a few in those greens and yellows that I probably would not include regardless, and I could mention those, but basically, I sort of looked at about money that could be set aside from that group, and I took the greens and yellows. I did not include the blues. I took the greens and yellows, set those aside. It's about $3 million is about what it ends up being of the total I had. And then that leaves about, so that leaves about $2-something million. I think I said that right. I'm looking for my summary sheet. Yes, that's about $3 million that's set aside to look at the ARP 50 some odd million. So that's not touched, that has not touched the 5.7 million. That's not touched that at all. And so then I looked at a number of the requests that we received, and I did pick out a group of those, and I'll mention those specifically, that are not in the red and green. And it totals about 550,000. So of the, roughly it leaves about 5 million of that 6 million that's not committed. And I did, I could certainly see entertaining at least a 1 cent tax decrease at about 4.2 million that would come off of that. And then if some things don't work out and some of the other, that could actually just be, the balance could just be remaining. I do want to point out that any tax reduction based on that $6 million a year for the next 3 years that's not recurring money. So at the end of the third year, if we're looking at if there's a tax decrease, then that tax decrease is going to have to be replaced, unless there are other funds that allow us to take care of that. And there could be other recurring monies that could be a part of that. And I do want to mention that I think everyone in this group knows that we were planned this year for the next installment of our debt leveling plan. And so that is what prevented us from being revenue neutral, was the fact that we had some debt leveling increase. And fortunately, with reevaluation, that increase is far less than what we anticipated at the time we created that portion of debt leveling. So I do want to mention that any reduction in tax rate expires at the time the 6 million, the 3 millions are over, unless there are other things that happen. So it's not quite like dealing with recurring money. We're not dealing with recurring money forever to do that. So, but the ones that I thought that I would want to fund differently is that I do think that the Arts Council made a very good case for their issue. And by the way, I did go, there are 800 and some odd pages of the applications submitted by each of the alternative service levels. It's long. And I was able to kind of get into and look at several of those that I had particular interest in, which I'll say part of that for later. But basically, in the Arts Council part, They're asking for, it was actually $150,000 increase, and I felt pretty good about a $70,000 increase on that out of the 150. And then at next year, we can revisit that issue, because I think there were some, as indicated in both the presentation at the budget hearing and in their documentation, there are a lot of struggling. We are an arts community. It is a part of our economy. That's been well demonstrated, and that, it's trying to help folks get back on their feet through those losses. I think this could at least provide some support on that. The Creative Corridors project it appears to me to be more, as I read the details on that one, is clearly a sort of a city park. And I probably do not see, I personally don't see as a county participant, other than there will be a memorial in that park, to Peter Oliver, the freed slave from the 1800s, and there'll be that the house was discovered and excavated, and it will be on the site of the Winston Museum. And when it's time to put up that statue or whatever it is, I could see that being, once those plans are done, I could see that being something that's a public art that we could contribute to when we get to that point. But at this point, basically they're asking for money, $100,000 to do a plan. I think that's a sort of the city park plan issue, and it's not ours. So I'm not recommending anything for Creative Corridors, except when it gets ready for maybe a statute that I think it would be appropriate for us to look at. For Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods, I've always felt like they do. In fact, they work a lot, as Fleming mentioned, in those census tract areas. They do a lot they build capacity in families. I've spent some time talking with them. I talked to Commissioner McDaniel yesterday. She was talking about her participation. I don't want to steal her comments, but she talked about her participation in those recently. And I think I'd be in favor of their full request of $60,000. And in the, gosh, if I can't read my own writing here. On the Conservation Fund, I really appreciated the Sons of the American Revolution actually here talking about that project. And I asked some further questions. I knew some information about that from Michael Leonard, who's worked on this project. And actually, even if they get all of their state dollars, grants, et cetera, they're still short. And I think that they're trying to piece together this 2.8 million plus other parts. I'd be very much in favor of that $100,000 for the Conservation Fund. The Winston-Salem Theater Alliance is a group that we helped a couple of years ago with a small amount of money, $10,000. I had an opportunity to see what they've done in 2 years. Visited the old bus station. They have really done a yeoman's job in that. Been a lot of small grassroots support, and they are going to finish that. But there are pieces of that, because I actually looked at pieces that are not funded that won't happen. They can open without them, but at some point will need to be raised. And I'd be in favor of the full $90,000 request for them. Under the creative economy, there was a small request, and I thought their presentation, they've been in business 10 years. There have been permanent companies that have located here from 2 different locations. I think, as I recall, Connecticut and India. They're small companies producing $8 and $9 million in revenues, and I think the request was for $16,000. I'd be in favor of that. Senior Services, their request for their new building was not listed under potential. No one ranked it. Their request for $1 million, which is to build a very expensive addition, and Senior Services does great work, well established, and needless to say, we're an aging community, and I felt like a fifth of their request to us, $200,000, would be appropriate. Under the Shepherd's Center, I'm in favor of their $10,000 request. They also do great work in this community with our those that are aging. And there was a small Senior Services request for $5,000 in their general operation budget, and I put that in there too. And if my totals are correct, that's about $551,000. So it does leave a good $5 million or so left plus, and I'd certainly be willing for this one, kind of year-to-year tax decrease by 1 cent.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Thank you, Commissioner. Make sure you can hear me. All right, so one of the roles and responsibilities for me as a commissioner, I'm also reminded that we're responsible for setting the property tax rate. So I do believe that it's important to share in the fairness to the citizens to reduce the tax rate. So I wanted to say thank you to our budget department for putting together the recommendations, and our manager as well. And I will respect the budget and the continuation budget that was asked as well. However, I wanted to tell my colleague, Dr. Don Martin, thank you for the budget sparring that we had on yesterday, but I think that both of us, I actually enjoy the pressure sometimes. I think that both of us have come to a consensus that there is a need for the alternative service level requests, some request, and some of the requests could be later appropriated during our ARP programming continuation funding. So one of the things that I wanted this board to consider was our public health director, Joshua Swift, in the public health department, indicated that he needed a men's health coordinator, and that was about $60,000. And we know that we put a lot of work into Department of Social Services and Public Health, but getting to the meat of getting men more involved in the progression of our communities is really important. So I wanted to respect that request. Also, our sheriff, although that he gave a compelling presentation on yesterday, I would like to respect the real-time crime center intelligence request that he had. I thought that looking at the description was important, and with his collaboration along with the city of Winston-Salem, I think that we can get past that. So if my totals are right, Kyle, we can get together after this. I was looking at the alternative service levels. I equated about $630,000. And I just wanted to remind Don that I thought that we were moving towards the Winston-Salem Theater Alliance at about $40,000.
And I could go there. I kind of revisited that last night and thought about their issue.
Okay.
But
I mean, I can go either way. So I don't think that those are huge dollars that's really affected. And I think that you are pretty much on target. This is an approximate amount for the ARP that can be utilized in the next phase for about $3 to $4 million. So I could live with that. So with that being said, Chairman, that's my request. Thank you.
Commissioner Little.
Mr. Chairman, I like Commissioner Kaplan's approach of not putting the cards on the table at the present time, or his cards. I will say this on his behalf. He learned more in the legislature than any 2 or 3 people that I know of could have. And he has used it wisely as he's gone along, and he'll continue to do so. So at the present time, I would, part of my cards is already out anyway.
In other words, you know when to hold them, and you know when to fold them, so.
No, not always. Sometimes I think I do, but no, not always. It's good if one does know. At the present time, I would support the manager's recommended budget with the additional funds at the bottom to be used to reduce the tax rate. And the manager and his staff has spent a lot of time working on the budget, and they've just gone through in great detail, and I put a certain amount of confidence in that. And with that, that's basically all I have at the time. I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that those that have other, the thoughts that they have talked about, to have them listed or get the staff to list them so we can all look at them, because I'm sure there are things there, and if we can look at them and review them, it's just easier to do it that way.
Okay,
That's
Chairman,
all I have.
oh, sorry.
thank you.
I apologize, Chairman Commissioner Linville. Chairman, if I may, while the school board is here, we did have two things one thing that's comparative to the school systems that I would like you to consider. We had the Fillings Company with Caring Cultural. She had an ask for us that none of this fits into the description of any of the funding values that we had. So I would have asked her to reach out to the school systems for that request, because I think it's more in line with the behavioral health and your dollars for the school systems. Behavioral health is very important to me. And I also want to say thank you to our Chantel for helping me with the Well Center as well, another behavioral health agency that we did not ask for funding for, that I think that we can capture in the behavioral health revenues. So I just wanted that to be noted. Thank you, and I apologize for the interruption.
Well, that's fine. Well, from my perspective, I kind of agree with everybody, but I'm absolutely 100% foursquare in favor of the funding request from the Forsyth County School, Winston-Salem Forsyth County School System. The nonprofits, I don't think have been unreasonable. That would be Children's Law Center, the YMCA, Second Harvest Food Bank. They're all nonprofits. They all contribute a great deal to our community, and I think all of the nonprofits that we have now and probably will in the future. The only thing I would add to it would be the pickleball thing. I don't know what that would cost, but I frankly think it's a novel idea, and if it's catching on that much, I think it would benefit Forsyth County just to have a pickleball. I think that's what you call it, isn't it, Mr. County Manager? Pickleball has become somewhat of an issue, and it's a successful thing, so I think I'd like to see us give everybody an opportunity to participate. If it doesn't work out, if they don't like, citizens don't like it, there's no problem. But and even Don Martin likes to play pickleball, and I didn't even know what it was until this year. But it's that kind of thing. The things that we have to have and that we depend on: water, sewer. We've got a lot of things going on in this county that we do an awful lot with, and $503 million is a great deal to be responsible for. But now the question I have in my mind is, Mr. County Manager, what can you do with what you've heard from everybody?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I think it does make sense that maybe perhaps we break for lunch, give us a little bit more time, maybe if we could come back at 1:15 or 1:30, and what we'll try to do is make sure that we've captured the spending plans that that everybody's presented to us. And when we get back, what we can do is just present them back to you and make sure that we've articulated them well. We will include a few of the other kind of policy matters that the board's talked about, and that'll give us a chance. If we miss something in that, that's when we can get it added back, and we'll know what we need to present and what we need to work on. That will get us started on putting together the ordinance documents that we need, and we can put it together an ordinance document for each spending plan, so you don't have to, I think that when we get back, the main goal will be for us to make sure that we've captured the plans well, so.
Now, we need some time to look at it. If we get it put together, would that be, what's the best time for you?
Well, I was going to say, if we could have till 1:15 or 1:30, then we should be able to get that back to you. We can present those back in public session and have some discussion around them, and if we need to modify them at that point, we can.
Sounds good. Is that agreeable with everybody?
Yes.
1:30.
Is that, 1:30 is fine. We're adjourned until 1:30.